Today's podcast is sponsored by lighthousepowerbusiness.com.
June 26th, Francis Scott Key.
Sometimes we think we're powerless, but we can always pray. Francis Scott Key paced the deck of the 60-foot American sloop, the President, and prayed for favorable winds. The good Dr. Beans had been wrongfully arrested, hauled off, and locked up on the British flagship, HMS Tonnant. Keyes, who was a lawyer, and John Skinner, a prisoner of exchange officer, chased the British fleet to negotiate Beans's release. Just weeks before, British troops had pillaged Washington and left it as a smoldering ruin. Who knew where they would next attack, or what they would do to old Dr. Beans? If only Keyes' sloop could move faster. 2 long days later, near the mouth of the Potomac River, Keyes and Skinner found the British fleet and boarded the Tonnant. The British admiral said he planned to hang Dr. Beans, but Keyes showed him letters from many British officers whom the doctor had helped. The British did release Dr. Beans, but the admiral feared Keyes and his companions would tell the American military about his plan to attack Fort McHenry and Baltimore. So, he didn't let them leave. Forced to travel with the British, Keyes was powerless to help his country, but he committed the fort and Baltimore to God. The formidable 50-ship military fleet, with its trained troops, neared Baltimore Bay. Keyes thought of the American soldiers, mostly shopkeepers and farmers. How could they fight such massive military strength? British Marines returned Keyes and his companions, still under guard, to their sloop, which had been towed and then anchored behind the fleet. For 4 grueling days, they waited. Then, while the helpless Americans watched from their moored vessel, the British fleet formed a semicircle around Fort McHenry, just out of reach of American guns. On September 13th at 6:30 in the morning, the first British bomb burst in the air. Then, it seemed as though Mother Earth was vomiting shot and shell in a sheet of fire and brimstone. Keyes' sloop tossed upon the angry sea. As night neared, a shell punctured the American flag and ripped away one of its 15 stars. The flag hung limp, but just then, at twilight's last gleaming, a breeze stirred. The proud banner stretched to defy British guns. Darkness fell, and the British continued their unrelenting deluge. But there, in the red glare of the rockets and the white explosion of bombs, Keyes glimpsed the American flag. Groans of wounded men pierced the battle-worn night, but then, suddenly, all was silent. The blackness hid its secrets. Had the well-trained British troops landed as planned, or even attacked? Gloomy hours had lengthened. Rain clouds shrouded the long-anticipated dawn. Then, just after 6, the clouds parted. At the first light of dawn, Keyes strained to see the limp fabric hanging in the wind. At first, Keyes couldn't discern whether it was the American flag or the Union Jack. Then a morning gust lifted the flag, and stars and stripes unfurled and snapped in the wind. Keyes thanked God for his most merciful deliverance. He reached into his pocket and found the only paper available, the back of a letter. On it, he began, "Oh, say, can you see?" Gratitude had birthed poetry. He wrote 4 verses, and in the last, he poured the crux of his worship. He wrote, "Blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation." A line later, he added, In God is our trust. Psalm chapter 20, verse 7 states, "Some nations boast on their chariots and horses, but we boast in the name of the Lord our God." When you are helpless to rescue someone without options, what is your first go-to? Sometimes we think we're powerless, but we can always pray.
Hello, my name is George Morrison. I pastored in the Denver metro area for some 40 years, and now I travel with our ministry, Truth and Life Ministry, where we teach Christian leaders around the world. Our story today is about Francis Scott Key. Francis Scott Key was a lawyer in the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area. But I guess what he's best known for is the words that he wrote that became our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. But he had to write those words actually being held captive by the British as they attacked Fort McHenry during the 1812 war. As he looked on to the battle that lasted all night, and when the smoke cleared, you could say in the morning, he saw the flag still flying, battered a little bit, but yet still there. And that's when he wrote the words to our national anthem. You know, here he was, held in a captive way, and yet it did not restrict him from actually expressing his heart that became our national anthem, which is so popular today. You know, a lot of times we might feel restricted. A lot of times we might feel bound by our circumstances. But yet, it's in those moments, if we just open our heart and open our eyes, maybe we can see a bigger picture. Or maybe we can see something that will not only help us, but inspire other people. So my challenge to you today is this, is that even though we might feel restricted or bound up in some way, that we need to kind of look up and look to see if there's something else in this picture that might help us or help other people. So God always has a plan, and he always works things out for the good. That's my challenge to you today. God bless you, and thank you.
Today's podcast is sponsored by lighthousepowerbusiness.com. Get your free strategy session valued at $1,000. Get expert advice and take your business to the next level. Visit lighthousepowerbusiness.com to schedule your session today.